Is it secularism, or is it just the loss of narrative? If we'd have gotten rid of the God stuff, but kept this real attachment, I mean, people often quote, or used to quote, the founding fathers of this nation as if they were quoting hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. Like they just like, an argument was settled in politics by figuring out what the founding fathers thought. Can you imagine that
Not
today?
anymore.
In a debate today, someone says, but didn't you know that, that Thomas Jefferson thought there should be a separation between church and state? Like, who cares what Thomas Jefferson thought? These were sort of, crazy white old men, and that's how people see it now, right? And so the thing that's lost is not necessarily religion, it's this American narrative. It's the narrative that's important now, I think.
We don't have a socially recognized, legitimated home outside of the religions for people who want to ameliorate their foolishness, who want to enhance their connectedness, if you'll allow me a little bit highfalutin word, who want to cultivate wisdom.
Some people are saying that atheism is going out of fashion. You are doing a good job of trying to bring it back into fashion. Do you find something in that atheistic philosophical line of inquiry to fill your soul?
I think we're screwed as long as people keep looking in the wrong place. And that place is this realm of the propositional, right?
You stop bloody talking all the time, and you start doing other things. I mean, isn't that a bad thing to say at a conference?
Hello! My name is Freddie Sayers. I'm in charge of Unheard. We are partnering this weekend with the amazing Dissident Dialogues. Thanks, everyone, for making it out to this extraordinary place. We've struggled to find our way. What an opportunity we have now for the next couple of days to actually get to know each other and have proper conversations, and I personally am really, really excited about it. Without further ado, our first panel, our first deep dive, we're going off the deep end straight away today, is addressing the question of meaning. And to help us do that, we have two amazing people. The first you will know as Cosmic Skeptic, but he is no longer Cosmic Skeptic. He's the artist formerly known as Cosmic Skeptic. He's Alex O'Connor, and he is joining John Vervaeke, who is a professor of psychology from the University of Toronto, who has coined... Come. John, sit a bit. You might know John's YouTube series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So this question, we could not have two better people to help us solve. That's it. So, what do we do when we don't go to church? Is there underlying all of these culture wars, political crises, identity crises, some big, hard-to-define question, which is basically the gap where religion used to be? Will people come to big industrial buildings in Brooklyn to gather and find meaning in the future, do we think? Alex O'Connor, is there a meaning crisis?
I want to say yes. I want to say a misleading yes, because I think that people often, I think the title of this panel is Finding Meaning in a Secular Age. I'm not sure that the meaning crisis that we're in is strictly due to or related to secularism in particular. I think that if there is a meaning crisis, it can be described as the human condition. If you look at what people say on some self-help YouTube video about Albert Camus, talking about going into work, coming home, tide comes in, tide goes out, sun up, sun down, and none of it means anything. Sure, you can find that there, but you can also find it in the book of Ecclesiastes. This isn't a new thing. And so when people talk about the meaning crisis and feel a bit pessimistic about the fact that, you're struggling to find a reason to be and a reason to act, the first thing that I'd like to point out is that this isn't some modern phenomenon. It's exacerbated by new specific modern phenomena, social media, phone addiction, this kind of stuff. But the idea of struggling to find meaning is no new problem.
So you're an atheist.
Yes.
A proud atheist.
A reluctant atheist.
Where do you get your meaning from?
Well, I was trying to think about what meaning actually means. And generally when talking about it, I try to give some clever-sounding academic definition. But I was reading Blaise Pascal's Pensées, the Thoughts. This marvelous volume, and I don't think it was ever supposed to be published, but in the first part, Man Without God, he talks about the concept of boredom. There's this wonderful passage on the concept of boredom. And he says, it's where you get this famous quote that all of man's troubles spring from his inability to sit alone in a room in silence. And he imagines somebody who tries to pass their boredom by gambling. Every day he goes and places a stake in the hopes that he'll win some money. And this is how he stops himself from being bored. And Pascal says, well, give this man all of the money that he could have won in the gambling game on the condition that he can't play anymore. And you'll make him unhappy because there's no thrill in it, there's no excitement. Okay, so he doesn't just want to win the money, he wants to play the game. Okay, says Pascal, allow him to play the game, but he's guaranteed not to win the money. You're also going to make him upset. Okay, so what is it then? You need something like not having the thing desired, along with the illusion that once you achieve the thing that's desired, it's going to make you happy. But because having the thing on its own isn't actually going to make you happy, you also need to not have it. So meaning has to be something like that slightly self-deceptive position of identifying happiness in something you don't have, believing that you can achieve it, and then constantly not achieve it, right? Because it used to be the case that the things that, I mean, with the sort of centers of meaning, the self-help stuff that I was mentioning a moment ago, they say, you know, seek discomfort, cold showers, and go to the gym and eat healthily and this kind of thing. And it's because, you know, it used to be that when you wake up, it was a gamble. You don't know if you're going to have a shelter over your head. You don't know if you're going to have food to eat. Every single day, the thing resets. Now, you've got the money without the game. You've got the food, you've got the shelter, you're fine. So what people are doing is they're seeking out the game without the prize. This is why religion does it so well, because religion is the definition of something which you don't have now, and for your entire life will not have, and yet believe that you can have, and think that that thing is desirable. That must be the thing that religion serves. So, look, I was really happy to be invited and speak here, and I think it's wonderful, but when somebody asks me where do I find my meaning, I'm like, I'm as much in this struggle as anybody else. There's nothing that I can do to help you find it, except for firstly helping to try and recognize what it is that we're actually looking for. And I think it's maybe something like that.
John, do you recognize that struggle, that description, or do you have a bit more of a sort of purposeful view of it?
Well, no, I mean, I respect Alex, what he's saying, and I think there's important truths in it. I would say initially, I agree with Alex. There's a perennial problem of meaning, Ecclesiastes or books of the same ilk, and I think this has to do with the fact that we are perennially prone to despair, because the very processes that make us intelligently adaptive also make us perpetually susceptible to self-deception, and we can get bound up and cut off and disconnected from ourselves and other people. So I think there's definitely a perennial aspect, cross-cultural, cross-historical aspect to it. I think what's specific about what I call the meaning crisis is that those perennial problems usually have had perennial solutions. There have been, and the solutions are not what we call belief systems. They are systems, or better, make it more sort of dynamic, ecologies of practices, ways of transforming consciousness, cognition, character, community, that give people a sense that they're ameliorating this self-deception and enhancing their connectedness to themselves, to other people, to the world. And those ecologies of practices have been housed in various things, or homed is better. They've been homed in religions, but they've also been homed in these things that sort of hang on the border between philosophy and religion, like Buddhism and Taoism, and maybe Stoicism. And so what seems to be the case, though, is we don't have a socially recognized, legitimated home outside of the religions for people who want to ameliorate their foolishness, who want to enhance their connectedness, if you'll allow me a little bit highfalutin word, who want to cultivate wisdom. And because of that, and that has to do with some very important historical factors.
But do you think it's new, though? I mean, Alex was saying it's been around forever. Just a mile away, we have the Columbia campus. It has nothing to do with this conversation in a way, but the intensity of the political disagreement, the sense that people are fundamentally unreconciled. Do you think that is just another manifestation of this? Do you think we are in a particularly...
Very much. And I think from an anthropological point of view, not a theological point of view, from an anthropological point of view, these are religious events. These are people... Well, I want to do what Alex did. What is it that we're seeking? We're seeking meaning. So in cognitive science and psychology, we try to distinguish between the meaning of life, which is some grand metaphysical claim, and meaning in life. And philosophers like Susan Wolf and others. So what this is that it sort of has a bunch of factors, but one is, does the world make sense to you? Think of all the things you have in a video game and why people want to be in video games. Does the world make sense to you? Is there a story that you can play a part in? And is there a way for you to level up, for you to get better as a person, to enhance your agency? And so it's this fundamental sense of connectedness. And so you can determine meaning in life by asking people 3 questions. What do you want to exist even if you don't? How really real is it? And how much of a difference do you make to it now? These people in these events, they want to connect to something, a cause that's bigger than themselves. And they want it to exist. They think the universe is a better place if this cause is there. They want to they think it's really real. They think these are real events. This is significant, important. This isn't like going to the store and buying milk. And they think they can make a difference by participating in it, committing to it. And so I think it's very much, and the fact I think is very much an act about trying to get this connectedness. And the fervor means that it's being driven by, a tinge of anxiety, a tinge of hunger, a tinge even of, potential despair.
I mean, they would say, if they were here right now on this panel, they'd be pretty cross by that suggestion, I think, because they would say there are big problems. These are issues which they're engaging with in a practical way. Alex, do you look at the news? Do you look at stuff happening like in Colombia? Every day there are now these what appear to be completely unreconcilable battles. Do you see something existential in them, or do you think it's just politics or culture war? Or
well, existentialism is always sort of at the basis of political and cultural disputes. There's always some like bedrock that people are working from. Because if there weren't, then you could just solve these disputes by using reason. You could just sort of figure out what the disagreement is, figure out who most agrees with the bedrock that you both share, and there you go, like problem solved. But no, there's some kind of philosophical bedrock. The thing that people are looking for, the reason why you can't just argue people out of this stuff, and it's something that I've spoken to John about before, and I think we'll agree on, is that wherever this meaning thing exists, if you look at traditional centers of meaning, art and poetry and religion, like one of the unifying features is that it is non-propositional.
Yes.
It's not something that you put into a syllogism. It's not something that you sort of rationalize and argue.
Means?
So it's like, okay, the way I'll explain it is, I imagine, I kind of wanted to make like a sketch. What I'm trying to say is that the way of doing philosophy that arises with the analytic philosophical tradition, so trying to translate all philosophy into like if P then Q, P therefore Q, like that rationally follows, logical deduction, that kind of stuff. This is not how people interact with the world. This is not how people behave. If you open the Bible, you do not find a single syllogism. Like, this is not why people come to believe in God. This is probably something you'll talk about with Richard Dawkins and Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I imagined, for example, this sketch I wanted to make. There's like a man who is in desperation about to throw himself off a bridge, and someone comes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, I'm just so hopeless, life has no meaning. And the guy says, "Well, have you ever thought about the question of God?" And he says, "I've thought about it sometimes. Maybe I feel like I'm being listened to." And then he recites a poem to him, and he's overwhelmed with beauty, and he considers getting off of the ledge. And the man talks him through this narrative. He tells him about his own struggles with meaning and purpose. And the man's like, "Okay, I feel heard, I feel seen," and he's about to climb back over the ledge. But then he remembers that the principle of sufficient reason fails because of modal fatalism in the academy, and so he throws himself off the bridge. It's not how people think. It's not how people behave, right? Like this, like Keats says that, he says, "Do not all charms fly at the mere touch of cold philosophy. Philosophy will clip an angel's wings, conquer all mysteries by rule and line."
But you have a whole show devoted to philosophy. This is your topic. How?
Yes. Is that the time? I think we're... Yeah, I do, but...
Presumably you find it helps you. I mean, I'm really fascinated to know. You make you know, where some people are saying that atheism is going out of fashion. You are doing a good job of trying to bring it back into fashion. Do you find something in that atheistic philosophical line of inquiry to fill your soul?
No, but atheism doesn't really have that kind of content, right? And you're right that my show is all about philosophy, but whereas when I was like a 17 or 18-year-old getting started, my whole show, my whole shtick was doing the well actually thing, was doing, well, don't you know that commits that logical fallacy and therefore that doesn't actually follow from that. And you know what, it worked. People liked it. They thought, oh, this is cool, and they watched it. The reason I'm saying this now is because, you know, I'm not a 17, 18-year-old anymore. I've realized that it's not what connects with me. It's not, like, I can't remember where it comes from, but C.S. Lewis at one point talks about how when he made this shift, and what I'm trying to say is that where I used to do that, I still talk about philosophy, but I am trying to encourage my audience to, instead of getting down and analyzing every brushstroke of a painting and trying to understand the Mona Lisa by looking at it through a microscope and trying to figure out what the pigment is, by just stepping back and looking at the picture and realizing that that's what you were supposed to be doing all along. C.S. Lewis, when he made this kind of shift, because C.S. Lewis used to be an atheist. He used to be the rationalist atheist type. And then, okay, he becomes a Christian, but before that he realizes the importance of narrative and the non-propositional. And he realized that he was being asked by what I see as now sort of the popular philosophical analytic tradition. He's being asked to deny that which is most real to him. Meaning, purpose, narrative, stories that connected with him. He was being asked to deny that and accept as true the things that were most unreal to him. Like numbers and abstractions and sort of geometric shapes that sort of exist somewhere in the Platonic form of the realm of forms or whatever. And that's just not how humans work. So
you're already on the C.S. Lewis journey then? You did 2 steps out of 3.
Yes.
Get you back here in 10 years.
You mentioned my previous YouTube name. It's why one of my good friends used to call me his second favorite CS. I can't see something like that coming around the corner, but I've learned a lot from the man about specifically this. But C.S. Lewis himself, even being one of the most prolific apologists for Christianity in the world, realized that it's not about the apologia. He wrote a poem called The Apologist's Evening Prayer, which he imagined sitting down and those spending days and days arguing successfully for God's existence. I can do it if you want. It's like 2 paragraphs. It's quite short. I don't want to take up too much time. It's wonderful. He says, from all my lame defeats, and oh, much more, from all the victories I seemed to score, from cleverness shot forth on thy behalf, at which, whilst angels weep, the audience laugh, from all my proofs of thy divinity, thou who'dst give no sign, deliver me. Thoughts are but coins. Let me not trust instead of thee their thin-worn image of thy head. From all my thoughts, even my thoughts of thee, thou fair silence, fall and set me free. Lord of the narrow gate and needle's eye, take from me all my trumpery, lest I die. And coming from C.S. Lewis, that is an extraordinary revelation about what all of this is really about.
Well, you know, we promised surprises. To have the famous atheist quoting beautiful C.S. Lewis poetry is a great beginning to this conversation. John, you don't recite C.S. Lewis. What do you do to... Are you a theist? Are you halfway to being a theist?
I would describe myself as a non-theist. A non-theist thinks there is still an open question about the referent of words like sacredness, without agreeing to the proposal that the only way that can be captured is by a supernatural, super thing, super person. So that you could, like, there are religions that are properly non-theistic, like Taoism, Zen within Buddhism, things like that. But I want to pick up on something Alex said. First of all, like you, I'm very impressed with the flexibility and depth of Alex's thought. I want to pick up on what he said about the non-propositional. This is a big chunk of my work as a cognitive scientist. I've been arguing that there are 4 kinds of knowing. There is 1, the propositional, what Alex has critiqued. And each one of these has its own kind of memory. This is how we know that they're actually distinct things. And then there's your procedural memory. This is knowing how to do things. You knew how to walk and sit down. You didn't do that by running an argument. That's a skill. It's not a belief, it's a skill. But it's a way of being in contact with reality. Then you have your perspectival knowing. You know how to notice things, how to focus your attention, how to be present or absent with people, right? And this you know that you have a kind of memory attached to this. This is your episodic memory. This is when you remember specific events and the perspectives you took on them. And then there's a deeper kind of memory that's called your participatory memory, your participatory knowing. This is your knowing by how you and the world fit together, given biological constraints, cultural constraints, historical constraints. For example, there was all kinds of things laid out for you culturally and biologically about walking on the stage and sitting in a chair. That was all available to you, in which if I dropped you into Papua New Guinea, you'd be going like, right? You wouldn't know. So all of those things. Now, why is that important, given what Alex said? Well, the argument is that those non-propositional kinds of knowing are where most of your cognitive agency is. That's where most of your meaning making is. Let me give you an example. We think we're talking abstract thought when we're talking propositional. Listen to the word abstract, lift out. We talk about moving around and progressing through an argument, or getting to the end, or what's underneath this argument, or what does it stand on, or can I we use all this language, and what's becoming apparent from cognitive science is we take all of that non-propositional machinery that we use for navigating the world, I mean like the physical world, and what we do is we bootstrap it up into navigating the intellectual world. And so this world up here, the abstract world, can't actually function autonomously. It has to constantly get nourished by the non-propositional. That's what he did with the poem.
So what do we do with all of that? How do we...
Well, you stop bloody talking all the time, and you start doing other things. I mean, isn't that a bad thing to say at a conference, right? But what you do is, you have practices. You have to do individual, and what the research is showing, you have to do collective, collaborative practices. So, I do Tai Chi Chuan, I meditate, I contemplate, I do a journaling practice from Stoicism. And what you do is you find sets of practices, and there's formal reasons for this, but they have sets of strengths and weaknesses, and you try to get them so that they're as self-corrective as possible, so that you are comprehensively intervening in this meaning-making machinery. Because here's the thing, it's not optional. It will run regardless of what you're doing up here. The issue is, can you get it run in a way that is actually at least responsive to good argument and evidence up here? And the answer is you can. It's not optional. You can't I just won't pay any attention to that. That's not optional for you. But what you can do is make practices. This is like Plato. You want to get the man and the lion and the monster properly talking to each other. And a lot of that talking isn't through speech. It's by engaging in new ways of noticing, new ways of taking a stance towards a situation, new ways of assuming an identity and a role in a situation.
It feels somewhat mechanical, though, doesn't it? I mean, both of these processes, whether it's creating a task that you can never quite conclude, which you talked about at the end, that offers a false promise, or engaging in practices that almost seem to sort of trick your soul.
No, I wouldn't say trick.
Are you doing these with a sense that there is a truth that you are getting closer to? Is this a purposeful, faithful activity?
Well, I'm going to challenge you, because you used a property of propositions to ask me the question, which means you're still prioritizing them. Your skills aren't true or false. They're powerful or not. And power is another way we judge realness. Your perspectives aren't true or not. It's whether or not they make you feel present in a situation. And you're foregrounding the right things and backgrounding the right things. Are you taking the right role? That's your participatory knowing. That's real, because if you don't take the right role, you can't engage with the correct set of problems that you're being faced, and you can't be responsible in the appropriate manner. These are all different ways. We don't have a single sense of realness. We have multiple senses of realness, and part of what I think we're trying to do is relearn how to re-coordinate those senses of realnesses so they are not operating orthogonally or antagonistically, but so they're mutually correcting and affording each other, so that we get the fullest possible connectedness to what we think is most reliably real, not just abstractly, but in the guts of our lives.
Putting all that together and trying to zoom out to look at how the whole of society might or might not shift, do you think we're screwed? Do you think... are we going to have millions of people engaging in this kind of purposeful activity and therefore changing the direction of the meaning crisis, or do you think we are headed in a direction that only gets worse?
I think we're screwed as long as people keep looking in the wrong place. And that place is this realm of the propositional, right? That's why I think John and I get on so well in the podcast that we did together as well. It's because this is something that we can completely agree on, that obviously, sorry to disappoint you, I can't tell you how to find meaning. That's not something that I'm going to be able to do in 6 minutes and 53 seconds. You know what I mean? And I don't think anybody seriously thinks that I'm going to be able to do that. But you're still here listening. We just want to sort of talk about what meaning is. So I can't tell you where it is found, but I can tell you where it's not. And it's not found at the bottom of a microscope. It's not found in these syllogisms. People don't... Anything that brings people meaning, being talked into it or being talked out of it, never happens, rarely happens, because of syllogistic argumentation. It's something else. I was reading Leo Tolstoy's Confession. It's a wonderful... it's brilliant. It's only like 100 pages. And he talks about how he knew somebody who'd been on a camp with his brother or something, and it stunned me as well because it was so long ago. It reads as if they're talking about the modern world and its abandonment of religion due to technology and all of this kind of stuff, but this is Tolstoy. And he says that this friend, he's out with his brother, and they're in a tent, and at the end of the night he sort of bows down to pray, do his nightly prayers like they were trained to do as children. And his brother says, "Do you still do that?" And that question alone, just that, was enough, such that man never got down on his knees and prayed ever again. There's no argument. There's something that isn't syllogized, that's sort of brought about by that kind of attitude that completely changed his mind. And Tolstoy himself concluded that while looking for questions of meaning, he realized that the more precise the answer, the less interesting the answer was. And the more it was, the closer it was to answering the question that he was interested in, the more vague it necessarily became. You know, I can tell you, in principle, exactly how many molecules are in that jug of water over there. But who cares? Like, it doesn't mean anything. And I think we're sort of stuck. The reason that we are sort of perpetually screwed is because of that sort of that discorrelation, that anti-correlation, that the more specific the answer becomes, the less interesting a question it's answering with relation to meaning. Wherever meaning is, in other words, it has to sort of lie within the gaps there. And that's an old story. That's nothing new.
Is that pessimistic or optimistic? I'm trying to work it out. What is the answer to "are we screwed"? I mean, do you think, we're putting all that together, we have a secular society. The numbers for religious faith are continuing to plummet. Do you think there are mechanisms, narratives, poems, structures that will help rebuild something out of this?
Yeah, I don't think it's because, look, I'm speaking very the people who have said that I'm on some kind of C.S. Lewis conversion story might get excited by the things that I'm saying. Don't be fooled. The reason I talk about religion so much is just because it's the best example of a narrative of a story. It's the most successful example of a narrative or a story. But the thing that's providing the meaning, the thing that I think is causing people to not be despairing if they're really sort of head first into this religious stuff, is not because of the religion, it's not because of because again, the thing that makes religion different from any other form of narrative is its propositional content, the belief in a god, the belief in a specific set of ethical codes. I've already said that I don't think is the important thing. The important thing is the narrative. The reason the United States did so well for a time was because it had this foundational nation myth. The meaning in an American's life after the Revolutionary War was not found in the fact that Washington swears in on a Bible, but because the man who's swearing in is himself something of a mythical figure.
But it seems to have lost confidence in that myth.
And so you point to like sort of the crisis of secularism in modern America. Is it secularism or is it just the loss of narrative? If we'd have gotten rid of the God stuff but kept this real attachment, I mean, people often quote or used to quote the founding fathers of this nation as if they were quoting hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. Like they just like an argument was settled in politics by figuring out what the founding fathers thought. Can you imagine that
Not
today?
anymore.
In a debate today, someone says, but didn't you know that that Thomas Jefferson thought there should be a separation between church and state? Like, who cares what Thomas Jefferson thought? These were sort of crazy white old men, and that's how people see it now, right? And so the thing that's lost is not necessarily religion; it's this American narrative. It's the narrative that's important now, I think.
John, do you think we're coming to the conclusion of this half hour? Do you think there are narratives that are on the up? Do you think there is cause to feel like this is not just a downward trajectory?
I think there's increasing sign for what I call the advent of the sacred. There are people who around, because I'm in conversation with them and I both study them scientifically and participate with them. There's all these emerging communities of practices, all these new ways in which people are trying to get at a home for their desire to connect and to transcend sort of the prison of their egocentric way of life. And they are generally open to the fact that they think the traditional way of talking isn't working for them. The fastest growing demographic group are the nuns, the NONESs, no official religion. They'll overtake Christianity in the United States probably in the next 2 decades or so. Something like that, or maybe a little bit longer. And these people are not, by and large, sort of, just dyed-in-the-wool analytic atheists. They're very much, people like Alex, people who are, I think appropriately called seeking. They're seeking in some way. They're open. They're trying to consider new ways of thinking about this. And I think that is predicting that there is going to be a fundamental change. I mean, barring that we don't destroy the world and other things along the way. Because any attempt to, and this would be my critique of all ideological political endeavors, any attempt to top down this into existence is going to fail. This has got to bottom up. It's got to come up, like I said, out of that non-propositional, out of people doing new practices, forming new kinds of communities. Then the narratives will be born. They'll be born out of that. They can't just be made and imposed on people or sold to people. That won't take. That won't work.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much to both of our panelists on this conversation.